agents now. Nobody knows exactly what the future is going to look like, but we know there are going to be a lot of them out there. To get more insightful insights of that, we're going to go to our panel now. We're coming to talk to us about this. Savannah Konofsky is the Managing Director of Emerging Technologies from IDEO. She's going to be leading our panel today. That includes Chandra Khatri, who is the founding head of artificial intelligence at Ola Krutrip. Joining him on stage is going to be Eno Reyes. Eno and Joshua are other panelists. Eno Reyes, of course, is the co-founder and CTO at Factory. I was speaking with him and Joshua Wong, the founder and CEO at Hypotenuse.ai at our speakers event on Tuesday night. Two very smart guys. I'm sure the rest of the panel is up to that standard. We're going to find out with Savannah in charge. So Savannah, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Talking about talking animals because that's where our conversation evolved to or devolved to, I don't know, backstage, but hopefully we'll get there more towards the end of the panel. I'm Savannah Konofsky. I'm a managing director at IDEO, where I run our emerging technology lab. We're a global design and innovation firm helping businesses adopt emerging technologies. For all of you, let's start with some context. How would each of you describe your company and what you're building, and also what makes your take on AI agents unique? Chandra.
So I'm Chandra. I lead AI for Krutrem. We started Ola Krutrem to build the sovereign AI. That is, when I mean sovereign AI, it's building the silicon, which is the core infrastructure, cloud, that's where every processing happens, and then models and applications. We are building that for India, the full vertical stack, because that's billion users, hundreds of millions of smartphone users, so that's what we are building right now. In terms of agents, how I perceive or how my team or our team is looking at is we're trying to focus more on consumers, because I think at that scale, we think the agents can have an immense impact on hundreds of millions of users, and consumer is one of the areas which is yet to be picked, especially for multilingual markets, when there are unique requirements than more narrow niche, and that's what we're trying to address with the agents that we're building.
Thanks, Savannah. So, on the theme of AI agents, we're building AI agents, an AI agent platform for e-commerce brands. But essentially what we're doing is that we have a platform where e-commerce brands can manage their product information all in one place, and have AI automate and run their most tedious and mundane parts of their workflows. So if we imagine a brand like Adidas or Billabong, let's say, the type of products that they can get hundreds or thousands of products and new products in every single month. Typically, you have an entire department dedicated to doing things like creating their product descriptions, cleaning up their data, sourcing for information, getting all their images ready. Within Hypotenuse, we have a way in which our AI can run through all that information for you, hold all that in one place, and do all that cleaning, categorizing, creating of content, editing of images, all that automatically for you. So we can take that from a kind of workflow which used to take months to run to just being able to be done in a couple of days. And for us, we're very specialized in being able to handle this for large e-commerce enterprises. We work with a lot of the largest Fortune 500 brands globally, empowering all their e-commerce data and product information in the backend.
Amazing. Hi, everybody. My name's Eno. I'm the co-founder and CTO at Factory. And at Factory, we are building a platform for enterprise organizations to delegate software development tasks to agents. And so what that means concretely, coding, incident response, technical writing, all of these sorts of higher order software developer tasks basically can be executed by agentic systems. We call them droids in our platform. And a lot of folks are focused right now in the AI software space on coding, like the IDEs and coding agents. We think that's an absolutely critical part of the workflow, but there's so much more that software developers do. And in particular, we're focused on helping organizations navigate to agent-driven software development. So basically transitioning from I'm interacting with an agent collaboratively, like AI assistants, towards I am divvying up tasks, planning them out, and parallelizing them. I'd say that probably the biggest maybe like difference in our takes to how agents are built. There's a lot of things that we think are important that LLMs alone can't solve, like memory and proactive understanding. But in particular in the enterprise, controls for agents that have capabilities to execute code, run CLI commands, use identity are super important. And so we've spent a lot of time thinking about audit logging, like how do we make sure that we know who to blame? I think there was a talk earlier about who's to blame when an agent does something wrong, right? We build out a lot of controls to make sure your organization feels secure in doing so.
Okay, so all super interesting leading edge work, all building across multiple parts of the stack. I want to get the obvious question out of the way up front. Take a look at the session title. What's next for AI agents?
I can start with me. So I think it's just the beginning of AI agents. Even we as a community are exploring what is the capability of this agent, especially when they come together in a multi-agent systems. What kind of tasks they can do, what they are capable, what are their limitations. I think the next frontier of agents is about trying to make many agents work together. For example, as Joshua mentioned, there's this coding agent, there's this memory. In the context of, let's say, consumer agents, we want to build assistants which can order food, order groceries, book a cab, do some complex reasoning. So I think the next frontier, at least the one which will next 1 or 2 years will be dominating, is making this multiple agents work together and making the specialized agents be more and more accurate. So as they become more accurate, the coordination also improves, and when you bring them together with all the elements that are required, I think we will see a lot more impact versus what we saw. One example is when ChatGPT came. The first time when we all used it was simply transactional. It cannot do complex web reasoning and all of that. But now what we're seeing with Manas and what our team also is building, you see that these agents are now capable of doing much more complex tasks, and that's where things are moving. They're becoming from level 1. DeepMind and OpenAI defined 5 levels of intelligence. Level 1 was simply conversations. Level 2 was systems which can solve a complex task. Right now we're getting towards system level 3, which is agents which can do much more complex tasks and assistants which can work together with multiple agents. I think that's where we are. We will soon see innovators and then communication and the organization, which is level 5, but we are far away. Right now, in the immediate term, what we are seeing is agents which can work with many independent agents or systems and then bring them together, deliver more complex tasks, which was not possible before.
To add on to that as well, I think we'll probably discuss this a little more as we go, but I think Chandra, you're mentioning that that's very far away. I actually don't think that that's extremely far away. I actually think it might be actually something closer than we think as well. But I think what's next for agents, to me, I think of this in 2 parts. One of them is on the model scale area, and the other is on kind of market adoption and what it means for the application and industry layer as well. So on the model side, definitely exactly what Chandra, you're mentioning as well. We're going to probably see a lot more models where memory is going to be solved next. I think we're going to figure out some way in which we have some level of continuity, much longer running tasks, where instead of just a model being able to go out and run for a couple of minutes and do a bit of tasks, you can have ones where it's going to run for a couple of days instead. We're probably going to be solving some things around context windows as well, where entire kind of days or entire pieces of research and industry level knowledge are all going to be encapsulated so that you can handle much larger scale things. Probably much better function calls, things that are already being worked on as well, but I think that next level is actually turning all this into something that's extremely accurate, extremely reliable, multimodality as well, so that we can have models which are continuously running alongside us and performing all the actions that we need to see and hear. But I think also what's exciting for agents in general is also what that market adoption side looks like. We're really crossing thresholds where in the past, there were lots of things that we couldn't rely on. agents with LLMs are not something that's actually new. In 2023, we already had AutoGPT and a lot of attempts with GPT-4 to create multi-agents and environments that could run all of these. But what was missing was that reliability. These agents kept hanging. These agents kept getting stuck in different types of loops. This year, we're starting to cross into that threshold where these models are getting strong enough to actually run in multi-agent scenarios, being able to tackle much longer running tasks. And I think then what's interesting or what's next for agents is really real-world adoption over here. For us, we can see entire enterprises where these are Fortune 500 companies that are taking on these agents, and it's not just in small, minute tasks, but it's ones where they're giving full decision to it. Not just, here's a small task and I'm going to check everything, but here's a long-running job. For us, it's going to be taking care of all their product information and taking on that full decision-making process for it, and sometimes not even checking everything that's done by the AI.
I guess a follow-up question for you is, what are the big, or either of you, what are the big shifts in technology or breakthroughs that you're kind of coming through the pipe that are enabling these types of changes and kind of bringing the future forward faster than some of us might expect?
I think memory is something which will be big, and I think probably Joshua would like to add to that. We were discussing this backstage as well. I think that's one area where a lot of work is going to happen, because right now we have, as I was saying, there are individual agents. They are good at one task, but the moment you bring in multiple elements together, then you need to remember, you want to minimize the time. A task can take 10 minutes, you want to reduce it to 1 minute, and then to do that, you need to know in advance. And why don't you add to it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we've touched on two things that I think are like tech blockers: memory or statefulness in general, right? So you could have interactions that you've already had that can be stored. We call that memory. You can also have a more proactive information that the agent's absorbing around the environment, storing that for later use. And I think that just consistency in the interaction pattern is something that probably needs to happen at the application layer rather than at the model provider layer, versus the long-term goal-directed behavior that you mentioned. That ability to persist over not just 10 minutes, but an hour or 5 hours, comes from blending statefulness with post-training, which is ultimately going to have to happen at the model provider layer. And I think that Anthropic, OpenAI, a bunch of the labs are all very focused on improving the time spans by which these can operate. But until we have that, I think it'll probably be difficult to orchestrate your way out of that. But I think that the third thing that is pretty interesting on this idea of adoption is really the behavioral shift that's required to interact with agents versus assistants. And I think that this is almost a UX problem, where we haven't really built out systems that can interact for hours. We have Slack and Jira and these tools that we use with other human beings in the loop, but agents are not humans. They're a pretty different thing. They're maybe more like faceless contractors, and so the platforms that we use to interact with these systems is going to look really different, are going to look really different, and I think that is almost like a creativity problem on folks like us to build out these interfaces.
I definitely hear you on that side, and a lot of the work that I'm doing is thinking about the human side of this, and I think that we have practices where we're designing software, designing experiences for humans, and we need to have software and experiences where we're designing for agents and the intersections between those two things as well. I'm curious to dig into the human questions a little bit more. How are you already seeing agents change the way that individuals and teams work, whether that's like the teams that you run or the organizations that you work with?
So what I'm seeing is, as we are building products which is consumer-centric, and also my team which is more developers, what I'm seeing is that the adoption of the developers in my team, they are using more and more coding agents, a lot more. Like what the amount of code they could deliver or execute or whatever has gone dramatically. Has become 5x in the past 1 year. And test cases, robustness, that's all increasing. But that's more audience which is more used to using these LLMs and intelligence. But then there is audience, which is consumers. They don't know much about these. They just want a good experience. And what I'm seeing is, if you look at the smartphone revolution, smartphone brings different apps. I have an app for shopping, I have an app for cab booking, I have an app for search, whatever, right? Now, what's happening again is that the entire UX is changing. And what I'm seeing is, as we build this consumer app, consumer AI assistants, what I'm seeing is that consumers are liking the experience where there's only one interface. I just want to use an AI, I interact with voice, and I just ask it to do whatever, cabs, food, whatever, right? And it does it. It fails as well. We're not there, and that's why we need to go deep and build domain, basically add more intelligence to it. But also horizontally, when they communicate, we have to build that. And I think that's very new. And consumers are giving a lot of positive response as they're seeing this experience. It will take some time, but I think it's something which we are seeing early adoption. And people who are using it, we are seeing them repeat as well. And I think if this becomes if the adoption increases, we will see the entire UX will change. Instead of companies building apps, they will basically bring their MCPs and agent to agent. We will cover that later in maybe this conversation. They will rather embed their systems, their data, their APIs in the AI assistants. I think that's what we are seeing early signs, but I think we'll need to know how good that can be.
So similar there as well, I think as Chandra was mentioning on the first part, even our teams right now, a lot of them are using coding agents. They're using a lot of things that accelerate their workflows. So they can code in a way 2-3 times faster at times as well. Certain and entire components now can be built out, especially I think with Ino's factory as well. What we're seeing with our customers is that there's definitely a scope change happening in roles. It's not just here's the exact role that you have before, and now we're just going to lay on a little bit of AI or sprinkle it on, and everything remains as before. There's a bit of process change that's happening. Certain roles will shift completely, where instead of having any sort of let's say, for example, some parts around writing or checking for, or even kind of copying and pasting and adding in data over there, a lot of those roles are just completely changing, and it's becoming, now it's much more a reviewer role and an editor type role rather than needing to kind of do that full process. And so there's a lot of scope change to even just kind of bring people up, where it's higher level seniority people instead of a lot of these, what people may call kind of intern or just fresh entry level type roles there.
Yeah, I think that we've similarly seen a blending of roles. So your org may have a software reliability engineer, a back-end, a front-end engineer, a platform engineer, and I think that what a lot of agent-driven software development enables is all of this to be the same person. Now, that doesn't mean that it goes from 4 people to 1. It's still 4 people. They're just now touching the entire life cycle because they understand how to operate within it. And I think that the workflow change that's interesting is a lot of the comments here and what we hear as well from the enterprise is the volume of code that we write has gone up. We're writing 3 times more code. We're building way more, but the actual productivity gains on like launch release dates and on hitting timelines and on regressions aren't changing so dramatically. It's like 10%, 20%. And so people are like, where's the 10x come from? The orgs that we've seen unlock truly like 5, 8, 10x improvements are really changing the whole workflow from being a serial workflow where, you know, the whole life cycle might be I plan out what to do, then I write that code, then I review that code, and I test it, and then I ship it, to I plan out 5 things at once, and I spend most of my time figuring out what actually needs to be built. And then I send the agents off to go and ship. And I think that there's almost like a TikTokification of software development that's happening right now where you kind of like shoot the agent off and you say, okay, let's just see what happens. And you context switch immediately to the next thing, shoot it off, see what happens. And so I think that that is maybe unclear how productive that is. Like it's definitely exciting. It kind of gives you that feeling of, oh, I might have my work completed for me, or I may have total slop that comes out of it. It's hard to tell in advance. But I think that we'll figure out better ways to review this larger volume of code with agents as well. And so that workflow is just going to move, similar to like GPUs versus CPUs, from being a very serial thing to a parallelizable process.
Definitely. I think that we should coin TikTokification here right now. A follow-up question for you. I think that anytime we start talking about how our work is changing and how human labor is changing, it's important to talk about some of the ethical questions behind this and the augmentation versus automation. So how are you seeing that in reality start to kind of play out, and what are your thoughts on how that's going to play out moving forward?
Yeah, for sure. I think that this is something that we talk about a lot because if you look in the software AI agent space, there's like at least a couple of companies that it seems like their whole pitch is, come check us out and replace your software developers. And I think that the reality is that's something that sells well to VCs. It's something that you can use to raise the next round of capital. But when you actually deploy with an org, what becomes much more clear is that technical competence is more valuable than ever. The ability of a human being to plan and orchestrate is well beyond that of what current agents are capable of doing. And it almost seems like there is a clear role of human beings taking on a combination of ownership and responsibility for changes, right? Someone does have to be there, a human being, at the end of the day to take ownership over the good and the bad. And the planning and orchestration process, being the interface to the human world is always going to be important. And so, despite the I think broader like fundraising narrative in the space, most organizations I think are taking these productivity gains. And if you imagine that there's some sort of ceiling of like software dev to be done, right? You kind of have to imagine that we're basically at peak software. Like no more software needs to be built. We're at the max. So at this point, let's just stop getting developers. And that's obviously ludicrous. Like we haven't gone to space. We haven't fixed most of the biomedical problems that we can fix. We don't have humanoid robotics and other sorts of systems like that. There's infinite technology to be built still, and we're just touching the surface. And so I always say this, but like I think this is the least amount of software developers that we're at human history. I would expect 10 years from now there to be 10 to 50x more software devs. The last thing I'll say is that's not to say that there won't be demographic changes in like the types of organizations that exist. Clearly, consolidation into very large horizontal organizations like Atlassian, AWS, Microsoft will happen because they have the resources to go horizontal. And an explosion of very small organizations that can now do the work of what used to be 10 or 20, I think will start happening. So you'll basically have the option of do something interesting, novel, new, and do it 10 times faster, or work for an enormous company and help them on their like much more ambitious or larger scale goals. Curious what you guys think.
Well, I think some similar thoughts there, I think in terms of that acceleration as well and augmentation. I think if for those of us who are in the Bay Area, we would probably have seen some ads or billboard signs going around that says stop hiring humans, hire AI sales reps instead, or a lot of kind of similar type marketing style teams like that. I don't think it's something that's binary. I don't think it's going to be everything's going to be just pure augmentation or everything's just pure automation. For a lot of the things that we do, and I think in software engineering will be true, which is a lot of that is very augmentation driven, but there are a big number of roles and jobs where there is going to be pure automation coming in play. And I think a lot of that is going to be, if anything, it's going to be scope change. Even for us, we definitely position ourselves as acceleration, not pure automation. We don't come in to try and replace entire teams, but it does definitely create a scope change for what the people are doing. Previously, a lot of, let's say in the marketing space, there are lots of people that are focused on low-level, let's say, copywriting, or trying to form up different parts of ads, or small, kind of very minute types of editing of images. A lot of that now, that scope changes to not just, they will still be around, and for a lot of the teams that we work with, it's still the same number of people, but the type of scope of work, the type of role that they're doing has changed quite a bit to become now more of reviewers, editors, and making sure that those can be done in the right way and working together with AI to do that. But it's definitely a big change. And those roles that were there before are no longer just pure collaboration. It's now kind of a lot of automation together there as well.
Okay, so watch this space. We'll see how things continue to play out. I'm curious to get into a little bit more of the details. Are we talking about the existing software stack? Is there an evolution? What parts of the legacy stack are we going to be continuing to work alongside, and what parts of it are really holding your customers back when we talk about actualizing this work?
So one thing which I'm seeing on the software stack, I think probably Joshua has a lot more experience there, but I think one thing on the coding side I'm seeing is that enterprises are not transforming at the speed with which LLMs or the agents are innovating or transforming. And the reason is that there's this Chinese wall. There's a guardrails. There is this data. This is my data. I don't want it to leak. So a lot of these things are very new, and enterprises are not able to adapt or bypass this. Or same thing when we are building these products or solutions, we are not able to get there as fast because of this data layer of guardrails. So I think that is a big. And second thing is the GPUs. Is it an on-prem or should I use cloud? A lot of these things are yet to be taught and more generalized across the enterprises, and that's what is that's the barrier that all of us have to sort of pass and make sure that the enterprise actually adopt to these technologies. Because you can the things which can be done by one software developer, for example. Right now they're investing tens and hundreds. Now what can be done is if my developer can use AI, let's say Copilot or whatever, if I can do what I do in 1 week, if I can do that in 1 hour, that actually helps enterprises. Now they can actually do many more things, and that's the barrier because of this data. That's not happening, and that transformation will take at least a couple of years. And I think there's some big players in each domain or vertical. Finance, IT, we are seeing that, but I think the large, mid, and small companies are yet to adapt and catch up with the innovation that we're coming with.
Agree on the enterprise adoption side as well. I think one of the big barriers is how quickly these enterprises can move and actually take on their software. A lot of it because of just internal regulation and policy. But I also think it's one of the most exciting times for software. For once in the past few decades, we have a chance to change everything. A lot of the customers that we deal with, they work with very legacy systems to store their product information. These systems haven't changed in decades, and every day they complain about them. They say that they're very big legacy systems, very slow, very bloated. It's hard for them to do any kind of task on it. But yet they haven't had a chance to change in the last 10 or 20 years, because if someone just comes in and they say, hey, I want to make your platform 10 to 20% better, and I'm going to build a nicer interface for you, there's no reason for them to change, because it's a huge lift to change any of their software. But for once in the entire 10, 20 years of looking at these systems, we have a chance to not just make it 10 to 20% better, we have a chance to make it 10, 20, even 30 times better. And it's because we're building in a way where all these tasks that they used to do on these platforms, we can now do it in a way where AI is going to be working alongside them. It's going to be automating a big part of all their workflows that they're doing on these processes. For us, it means automating their images for them, their content, their copy that's written, their data, cleanliness, and all that in a way where now they have a chance, and now they're actually having large enterprises willing to shift entire systems because they know that the ROI, the gains, the efficiency, it's not just something where it's being talked about. They can see it in reality, they can see the multiples that they're gaining from it as well. And I think that's where it's going to cause a big shift in terms of enterprises coming ahead. Definitely still slow in how fast, compared to how fast LLMs are moving, but compared to kind of the past cycles of platform changes, I think this is a much faster acceleration.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, yeah, it is interesting because even in the enterprise, what we've seen is that the largest customers that we have and the biggest accounts that we talk to are actually like almost more aggressively adopting AI than some of the more mid-market. Startups remain the fastest, definitely, but there's, I think, a reluctance to pick an option almost because there's so many options. And this is especially clear in like the AI software dev space, but I think in a lot of products, like you mentioned AI SDRs, like there's literally so many options that I think a lot of folks in the mid-market have analysis paralysis, where they're like, oh, next year there might be a better model, should we pick this model or that model? Versus in the enterprise, they're looking at a couple of different things, like security, is this the right deployment? Does it all make sense within our environment? And then once those boxes are checked, they're aware that as long as you make a reasonably good decision, the incremental gains are going to compound over the next couple of years. And so I think that the blockers are the classic stuff that have always been software blockers. VPC, our legacy system doesn't connect, how do we get that fixed? But the more interesting blockers are, when you have field that's moving so quickly, when is the right time to kind of make that decision? It's like a stopping problem. If I stop now, am I going to lose out on the next big thing? And I think that enterprise got burned by cloud, they got burned by mobile, and this time they're very much trying to not get burned by AI.
I think I'll just add to it. I think that's where this, if you look at the evolution, in 2000 when internet was there and then there was this smartphone, there have been protocols, like there was TCP/IP and then REST API. So these enterprises started exposing their data to these, whatever application is being built through APIs. Now I think that's changing and we have to teach them. So there's this something called Model Context Protocol, MCPs, agent-to-agent protocols, where we have to build, or we are building this new protocols with which enterprises will be able to safely share their data or share their, bring models to their use cases as well. And I think that's where we have to sort of coach or teach the community to adopt. And if that happens, then I think we'll see seamless integration and adoption as well.
Just asking a question about those fears, like, are we hitting a wall in AI development, like some people are saying? Or are we just getting started? And what's your thinking even further out, or maybe not, maybe today? What's your current take on AGI? And what would change if we actually reached it? Is it 2 years from now? Is it 100 years from now? And most importantly, is it really AGI if we don't have AGI tigers and lions? Or is that just AG human intelligence?
Big questions. I think that at least to address the first part, the idea of there being a wall, I think that there certainly was conversation around this because synthetic data in the post-training process was not validated. Like, organizations were saying, for a while it was like every single org said, the way that we're going to win 5 years from now is by having the data. Like, we have this data that you don't have, and so we're going to win. And the unfortunate thing, I hope that you all were not one of those organizations, is that you can effectively completely replicate almost any proprietary data sets synthetically, and it kind of does just work, which is pretty crazy, very good for people who build on top of agents. It does mean that you probably have to find a new moat if data is your previous moat, but the workflow, though, remains incredibly important. And that's, I think, what a lot of orgs have still. The ones who said the data is going to be the way to win. You still have that workflow that is unique, that winning workflow that lets you succeed over your competitors. And so because the synthetic data that we can generate to make models better seems to clearly be working, and we're able to build bigger models, we're able to put more energy behind them, I do think that there's like a very clear path in the next 3 to 5 years towards extremely capable agentic systems, at least if you're looking at the main foundation model providers. But past that, I do think that we'll probably fragment into a world where the single best models require such an enormous amount of compute, the sort of like, let's let this run for 10 days to figure out a viable protein that can be used to fix a genetic disease. Like that sort of like super intelligence, that is going to be reserved to people who can spend the amount of money required to run for a very long time. And a lot of the focus 5 to 10 years out is actually going to be distilling that intelligence into smaller, efficient models that can be used everywhere. So I think there'll be a little bit less focus on like the frontier and more on distribution.
Okay, we each have 1 minute. Assuage all of our fears about what the future holds.
I think, as I mentioned, that there's this 5 levels of intelligence that has been defined by DeepMind, OpenAI as well. I think the future is from level 3 to level 4 and 5. Level 4 is innovation, which Joshua was referring to. These AI systems will start innovating medicines, complex, problem about space or whatever, right? So that is going to happen, and I think we are very close. Maybe in a few years we'll see more of that. And then there is this large institution which is level 5, and that also points to your AGI question, where AGI is, where are we? I think it's very hard to quantify where AGI is, because if you think about coding, we're already very close. Like, it's getting as good as the best coders that you have. Now, the best architect or the best coder will also build a system, complex system, design system. and that we will get in the next 1 or 2 or 3 years. So I think there are domains where we are very deep, but then there are domains which is general intelligence. I think we are far away. We'll get to level 4 and then level 5, which I have an idea. I want to start a company, but I don't want to build a team and all. I just want AI to do that stuff for me. That level of company or organization level intelligence will take a few years, but I think we are seeing early signs of those as the companies which are building certain use cases. This vibe coding is early sign of that, but I think we are still, as a community, have to do a lot in that direction.
We probably don't have time to debate on a definition for AGI here and what that looks like. But I don't think we're anything close to a wall. I think if anything, we're accelerating even more and we're only at the beginning. And one of those reasons why grounding into research, AI research and models is because of the scaling laws. For the past 4 or 5 years, we've been writing on LLM scaling laws, which tells us that if we increase compute, model size, data, the performance keeps increasing. We haven't hit any wall on that yet. That curve looks so smooth that it's almost unreal. And late last year, it was announced that a second scaling law was found in which if you increase test time compute, your performance continues to increase. Granted, for those of us who are looking at it, it's logarithmic scaling. But basically all that says is that we're nowhere close to a wall, even from a research perspective. Model performance is going to keep increasing for way more to come. And that's going to a lot for us in the coming time. It's possible that all the research breakthroughs that are needed to hit AGI may already be behind us, and now it's a lot about just kind of scaling some of these up. For AGI itself, I do think that's on a short time span away. Whatever the definition of AGI is, I think that a simplistic kind of point of view of what the definition is, we probably hit it around kind of that 1 to 3 year time span. But I don't think it's kind of probability doom and everything's going to be bad. If anything, I think it's going to open up breakthroughs for us in science, in medical research, in kind of even exploration and just discoveries that humanity can create. And I think that's going to open up a much more interesting or exciting world going ahead.
All right. Thank you so much to all of you, and thank you to our panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Sabata. Great job. All right, guys. Good to see you again. Joshua, likewise. All right. Great job, Savannah. Way to go.